TTT is a great game mode. You can use your intellectual skills to determine the traitors amongst your group, your aim skills to destroy your opponent, or even play VR chat with guns. But you know what it's missing? Your beautiful input. So let's fix that. This video is a short guide to help first-time mappers get into mapping for Garry's mod, namely the Trouble in Terrorist Town game mode. I'm going to cover what you'll need to get started, where to look for relevant information, and some general tips for making your own TTT maps. To start, you'll obviously want a copy of Garry's mod installed. Normally, I'd also tell you to purchase and install Counter-Strike Source, since it's required for the Trouble in Terrorist Town game mode. As of July 2025, however, almost all Counter-Strike Source content, as well as the Half-Life episodes, has been moved to Garry's mod, thanks to Valve. Next, you want to open your Steam library, right-click on the Garry's mod listing, and open Properties. Then go to Installed Files, and click Browse. This will take you to your G Garry's mod folder. I recommend you pin this to quick access if you're using Windows, since you'll likely be visiting these folders a lot. Now go to your bin folder, select hammer.exe, and delete that hot garbage and go install Hammer++ now! Seriously though, the most important program to set up I could recommend is Hammer++. There's not enough time in this video to show you the setup from start to finish, so just follow the instructions available on the official site. If you aren't using it now, switch to it immediately and learn the new stuff as fast as you can. Every second you're not using it, you're bleeding time of your one and only cosmic miracle of a human existence on pressing the compile button and waiting up to 2 minutes over and over again. Hammer++ gives you real-time lighting and skyboxes in editor, crashes substantially less often, lets you hotload models and textures, improves various UIs enormously, and more. It even lets you move things around using a widget designed for human use and not some kind of alien life form that can only think in two-dimensional windows. There's even more stuff I couldn't say in this span, so if you want to see everything it has to offer, see the link in the description. It otherwise functions the same as normal Hammer, so there's no opportunity cost or readjustment necessary if you're already used to the normal editor. If you don't use Hammer++, you're going to have a worse time, crash more often, and make worse maps, I guarantee it. Moving on, there are some other programs you'll want if you plan to use or make custom assets for your map. I don't recommend this for a first-time Hammer user, but I'd be a hypocrite considering I also had scope creep the first time I mapped and ended up making a bunch of custom textures. You can make these in your image editor of choice, though if you're on Windows I'd recommend Paint.net since it's free, or Photoshop since most people have it. If you're on another system or need Photoshop's features, you can also use Photopea. Just make sure you save the result with dimensions and powers of 2. You'll want to get VTFEdit Reloaded, which is the unofficial update to the old VTFEdit. VTFEdit lets you make VTFs and VMTs, which are the source texture format. I recommend you toggle auto create VMT file in the options to save yourself a lot of time. If you're one of those freaks of nature who knows how to finagle 3D things, you'll want some kind of 3D editor, though Blender is ideal considering how much source related stuff is created for it. I'd also like to mention the GOAT of 3D source tools being D&E3D's tremendous Blender plugin Source Engine Collision Tools, which has so many applications I can't even begin to list them all. Chief among them though is the ability to convert Blender files into VMFs, meaning you can create or import an entire map into Blender and then load it up in a Hammer, no effort needed. Alternatively, you could make a huge amount of props without having to create whole separate collision models yourself for each of them. This lets you create more complex and detailed maps easily, and I'd seriously recommend the plugin if you're already good in 3D modeling software and want to get a Hammer map online as soon as possible. Also get Crowbar for if you plan to make custom models, since you'll need to compile them or decompile them into a source-readable format for use in Hammer. VIDE is useful for after you've compiled your own maps, since you can use it to pack materials, models, sounds, and even Lua code if you're clever into your maps. If you're using custom textures, this is absolutely necessary, else your players will get errors since they don't have access to the required files. Also, it usually automatically detects what files are relevant if you use the scan button, but the feature broke for me and some others recently, and I have no idea what caused the issue. I recommend VIDE over CompilePal or BSPZip because neither let you manually pack files. This means you're at the mercy of their often shoddy order detection to pack things for you, which becomes a headache when it doesn't work the way you'd like. For decompiling maps, you'll want BSPSource. BSPSource allows you to decompile any map you find, with some exceptions. This is incredibly helpful if you're a first-time mapper, considering you'll often learn best how to do something by finding a map that does it well and copying its implementation. Also, if you want to work with Lua, I recommend a text editor like Notepad++ that can parse code, since it'll make things easier. Windows default Notepad text editor will work fine though. You should also make sure to append something like this to the top of any auto-run code you add with your map, since it'll prevent issues with code running when your map isn't being played. Don't worry about version numbers, as long as you can write the name of your map and keep version numbers coming after that, it'll be automatically handled. In terms of importance, GMPUBLISHER is second only to Hammer++. In order to upload a map to the workshop, it needs to be an add-on form. You'll generally just need GMPUBLISHER for making any add-on unless you're willing to learn the weird manual way of doing it, so it's a must-have should you want people to be able to access your map without needing the BSP. For all of these programs, I've put a download link in the description and or the relevant Valve developer community page. Speaking of the Valve developer community, there are several important sources of information you'll want to consult while you're mapping. First is, of course, the previously mentioned wiki, where you can find very detailed information about mapping entities, tools, and just about everything source development related. For the actual mapping side of things, you'll want to consult the Necronomicon of Hammer, the TOPHATTWAFFLE guides. Either series works, though I recommend you watch V2 considering the improved production quality and information density. If you take anything away from this video other than using Hammer++, it'd be to watch these to ensure you know what you're getting into. It also means you don't waste the time of the people on the r/hammer subreddit, or your local workshop channel, with questions like, what's this .prt file error, or how do I make a button open a door? Though, one question that isn't answered by those videos relating to Garry's mod specifically is that you should always load up your map on multiplayer, and in the TTT game mode. That means after you compile, you'll need to change the player count away from single player and to any other player number, since otherwise a lot of stuff will break since it's not designed for single player's quirks. The TOPHATTWAFFLE videos also won't show you things specific to TTT. For that, I recommend this video by the Yogscast about making your own TTT map, as well as the official TTT mapping documentation, which should explain stuff like using info player deathmatch or TTT map settings. Things not answered in either of those channels are the sort of questions best asked in the Yo What Up workshop channel, or, if you live in a dark, hopefully distant future where Yo What Up as an institution has crumbled, the TTT subreddit Discord. There's also lots of important ideas I recommend you keep in mind with regards to making your TTT maps. First and most importantly for any TTT map is to ensure it has enough guns. The fastest possible way for people to hate your map is for them to spend the first 3 minutes of every round trying to get their hands on a firearm. It's almost impossible to add too many guns outside of making your computer lag or just putting them all in a big pile, so you should add lots of guns and spread as evenly as you can. In my experience, almost no one bothers playing maps with 2 little guns a second time, even if that map is otherwise great, so you absolutely must do this. Also, try to place guns in relevant positions rather than just spamming the TTT random weapon entity. The official mapping guide explains that you can use the ZM or TTT prefix to find in-game weapons and place them in your map, though be warned that add-on weapons won't spawn where ZM weapons are placed unless you're using TTT2. If you want to prevent TTT2 meddling with your gun spawns, name them all the same thing and make your TTT map settings spawn them a second after the round starts using an entity creator. For a tutorial on how to do this, see the relevant TOPHATTWAFFLE video. Fortunately, if you live in the future, you might have access to the new wonderful FGG changes by Fagardo, which allow you to pick what kinds of weapons spawn for a TTT random weapon, and thereby allow specific kinds of add-on guns to show up in certain places. The second most important is to test it with real players. You'll often miss important bugs or map flaws simply because you're too used to what you've created. Obviously, with a game mode like TTT that requires so many people get together at the same time, it can be pretty difficult to test a map. If you've got a server that's willing to humor community creations though, or a friend group you can mobilize, it'll help enormously in improving your map. You should also test your map yourself. Quite a few maps on the workshop have been published with obvious gameplay failures, like hallways that are too short to walk through, or missing textures, or Z-fighting and lighting issues. Third most important is to plan your map ahead of time and draw a layout. A piece of paper or slapdash cursor drawing is fine as long as it's comprehensible to you and lets you think ahead. This helps you create a cohesive layout that has some structure to it rather than just random hallways connecting to big box rooms. Make sure to integrate some verticality, cover, and irregularly shaped areas to help your map prevent feeling like a glorified set of office rooms. In terms of things like layout, design, and approach to gameplay, I recommend borrowing from Counter-Strike maps, as the combat in TTT is quite similar. I'd also recommend you try to abide by the Hammer Editor Discord group's TTT mapping contest guidelines, which give you both good principles and reasons for those principles. It also includes some useful tips for if you add Lua to your map. WGET's write-up on what divides good TTT maps from bad ones is another helpful resource, since it's a useful litmus for bad ideas and also gives excellent advice on how to plan a map. I know I'm giving you a bunch of homework, but treating your maps exactly like homework will make you think harder about them and therefore exercise more critical thought into making sure they're fun to play. Finally, while you could totally make a map without ever bothering to optimize it, you really should put in the effort to do so. Even if you don't care for people with inferior specs, it's worth it just so that you can save time compiling. But don't just take my word for what's felicitous. Award-winning mapper Cookie gave what she feels are the 3 most important things for first-time mappers to know. Take it away.
Number 1. Get your maps tested. Number 2. Don't get hung up on ideas. Be prepared to shift from your original idea where necessary. Number 3. Don't be afraid to start over with, remove or remake entire sections.
Unfortunately, I'm also obligated to warn you that even if through all this you create the best map of all time, you'll still need to work on your visuals. In fact, lots of players will happily play terrible maps so long as they're nice to look at. While I personally prefer the gameplay of a map to its aesthetic, this is a minority opinion, and you should keep this in mind while you map. For example, previously mentioned expert mapper Cookie says,
if you use developer textures, make sure to use different colors of texture per area. Even if it doesn't feel labyrinthine to you, it will to those who are seeing it for the first time.
Just to cap off this video, I'll list some tips on how I think you might want to use Hammer to save yourself some time. Most key is that you should operate on the largest grid size you possibly can while keeping scale intact. To ensure you're not making things too big or too small, use the Entity tool to place an info player start, which will show you the relative size of a player compared to the environment. When texturing, I recommend using the Justify buttons wherever possible to align textures, being sparing in your use of the Fit button. Use Alt with right click to quickly apply a texture to several surfaces. Some people like creating their whole maps out of no draw first, and then texturing it this way, though I personally hate doing this because I can't see depth properly doing that. If you have a custom no draw texture and a functioning occipital lobe though, this is a reasonable idea. Be aware that it's not actually any more optimized, as VBSP automatically culls faces that are outside the map, or those that are flush with another brush. You can also use hit and skip to optimize your map, but I've personally never felt the need to do this and wouldn't recommend it for a first time mapper, since VBSP does it for you automatically. When you're making brushes, most people just use the block tool, but I personally prefer the polygon tool since it encourages more complex geometry. Keep in mind you'll still have to respect Hammer's convex only rule. I also recommend the vertex tool, though you should be exceedingly careful with it because it has a high propensity to create concave brushes, which will cause you a lot of headache. If you must use it, you should use it to make a solid you want, then retrace it with the polygon tool and delete the original vertex solid. You can also use the vertex tool to correct geometry with subgrid precision. Just select all the points and then press Ctrl and B. If you don't want to engage with either the polygon tool or vertex tool, or if it's going to be faster for what you're doing, use the cut tool. You can hold Ctrl while you make the cut to translate its position while preserving its angle. When your maps start to take more than 30 seconds to compile, it's a sign you need to optimize. Sealing your map gives you a gargantuan optimization boost, but culling unnecessary brushes is going to be paramount. This is done by setting non-sealing brushes to Func Detail, using either Ctrl and T for an individual brush, or Ctrl, Shift, and T for setting multiple brushes to their own individual entities. What brushes should or should not be a Func Detail is hard to define, but the easiest way I can explain it is the following. When you press H on a brush, it will be hidden. You can press U to unhide any brushes you hit this way. When you want to know if you can set a brush to Func Detail, select it and press H. If you can see outside the level, the brush is sealing. If you can't see it, then the brush is likely non-sealing. So you can use U to unhide it, and then Ctrl T to set it to a Func Detail. For every 20 or so brushes you convert to Func Details, you should compile your map and see if you create any leaks doing this. The point file will show you what's wrong. If your point file goes through something that looks like it should be solid, you probably set it to a Func Detail. If it seems solid and yet it's being passed through, make sure you're not in solids mode and then select the brush again. Now for some miscellaneously useful keybinds and buttons. If you're selecting something from the camera, I recommend Ctrl and E to snap your non-camera views to the object. If you don't want to see skybox textures, triggers, or any other editor-only textures other than no draw, press the Toggle Tool Texture button. If you want to hide specifically no draw, press the Show No Draw Faces button. In Hammer++, you can change your camera's view to anything you like by left-clicking on the view's name in the top left corner of the view. If you want a view to take up the whole screen, press Shift-Z to expand it, and then press it again to return it to the original size. If this doesn't work, press Ctrl-A to resize all windows to fit. If you ever want to see all the entities in your level, go to Map, and then Entity Report. Keep in mind these are sorted in alphabetical order based on the entity's FGD name, not the name you gave them in their parameters. If any of these keybinds are uncomfortable or impossible for you, you can change them in the Tools menu, specifically the Keybind Editor. Also, when you compile a map, make sure you've unticked the Launch Game After Compiling parameter. Also disable any add-ons you have in Garry's mod, and if you're compiling the map for the first time, make sure to enable and disable a map add-on so that your map shows up in the selection. I've added a test map for you to mess around with in the description. It's sealed, but I've also attached a map with a huge skybox, so you can use it as a testing template for all your other maps. You should obviously seal your map properly before you expect people to play on it. I want to keep this video brief enough to stay as an introduction to mapping for TTT without leaving you lost regarding things beyond the scope of just Hammer, and I hope I've succeeded in that. I know I haven't covered stuff like how to write Lua for your map or all the actual intricacies of the Hammer editor, but this video is nearly 20 minutes long and there are plenty of other guides out there for those topics. If you've somehow made it this far having watched my previous videos and are wondering when the LTG clips are going to come back, first of all, you're incredibly dedicated and I appreciate you, but second, I'm sorry to say it, the chances that are low. My re-edit of the video was copyright struck by the man himself, though the original video is untouched. I don't fancy risking my channel making more, though you can find a re-upload of mine in the description. I'd like to thank the greater YoAdUp community for encouraging me to make this video initially, and motivating me to take this to the finish line. Special thanks to Cookie for the tips and Spanispy for the initial concept. I'd also especially like to thank Cap'n, who was previously the only other person procrastinating a project for this long. This video really should have been posted near the end of 2025, but for some reason I got really hung up on how to do the intermission chapter cards and lost motivation to keep working on the video before it was finished. You can probably tell this was recorded way after all the previous sections. Sorry if you held off on learning Hammer for this guide. On the bright side, at least it's out now. And that about wraps it up. Thank you for watching and have fun mapping.